The morning Holland Oakes received the phone call that would change everything. He was standing in the kitchen of his Rosedale home, pouring his third cup of coffee, watching the frost cling to the edges of the window glass the way it did every November in Toronto. His housekeeper, Mira, had already set out his briefcase by the door. His driver was waiting in the driveway. The day was planned down to the minute, the way all of Harland's days were planned, because a man who had built a commercial real estate empire from a single rental property in Scarborough 30 years ago did not leave things to chance. He almost didn't answer. The number was unfamiliar, a 705 area code, somewhere north of the city. He picked up only because his daughter was visiting friends in Muskoka that weekend, and some part of him still worried about her the way fathers do, even when their daughters are 32 years old and perfectly capable of handling themselves. It wasn't his daughter. It was a social worker named Deborah Firth, calling from the Children's Aid Society office in Orillia. She said his name was on file as next of kin for a woman named Paulette Oakes, formerly Paulette Renshaw, his late brother Raymond's wife, who had remarried and moved north after Raymond died of a heart attack 11 years ago. Paulette had been admitted to Soldiers Memorial Hospital 2 days prior with a severe stroke. She was not expected to regain full function, and she had a daughter. Harland set down his coffee. "How old?" he asked. 11, said Deborah Firth. "Her name is Willa. She's been staying with a neighbor since her mother was admitted. We need to discuss placement options." Harland hadn't known Paulette had remarried. He hadn't known she'd had another child. After Raymond died, she had moved away and the connection had simply frayed, the way connections do when there's grief on both sides and no one quite knows how to hold the thread. He hadn't even known Raymond was listed anywhere as next of kin for anything, let alone that Harland's own name had somehow carried forward through the paperwork. He told Deborah Firth he would drive up that afternoon. Mira watched him cancel his 3 o'clock with Pemberton Capital without batting an eye, and only said quietly, "Should I pack a bag for you?" "No," he said. "Then yes, a small one." The drive north took just over 2 hours. The highway opened up past Barrie into the kind of landscape that always surprised Harland. How quickly the city recessed you, how the scrub pines appeared along the rocky cuts, how the light changed. He had grown up in Barrie before his family moved to Toronto when he was 14. He had not been back in years. The Children's Aid office was a low brick building near the Couchaching waterfront. Deborah Firth was younger than she'd sounded on the phone, mid-30s, with reading glasses pushed up into her hair and the kind of careful composure that comes from delivering difficult news to people on a regular basis. She told him what she knew. Willa had been born to Paulette and a man named Garrett Renshaw. No, wait, Harland caught the name. No, a man the file listed only by initials. Paulette had never married again after all, Deborah clarified. The paperwork had been confusing. Willa was Paulette's daughter from a relationship after Raymond, a man who was not in the picture, and had surrendered any legal claim years prior. There were no other family members they'd been able to locate. "Can I meet her?" Harland asked. Deborah paused, not with hesitation exactly, but with the kind of look that measured a person before answering. "She's next door," she said, "in the playroom. I should warn you. She hasn't spoken much since her mother was admitted. The neighbor says she was always quiet, but this is different. She sits, she watches, she eats when food is put in front of her. But she hasn't cried, and she hasn't asked questions, and honestly, Mr. Oakes, that worries me more than if she'd been screaming." He followed Deborah down a short hallway and through a door with a small window. The playroom had the particular sadness of rooms that try too hard to be cheerful. Bright plastic chairs, a bookshelf with board games missing half their pieces, a mural of cartoon animals fading along one wall. Willa was sitting at a low table with a piece of paper in front of her and a pencil in her hand. But she wasn't drawing, she was just sitting there, very still, the way an animal sits when it's trying not to be seen. She was small for 11, thin in that way that suggested not illness, but simply a life where second helpings weren't always available. Her hair was dark and needed cutting. She had Raymond's eyes, or what Harland imagined Raymond's eyes might have looked like in a child, that particular shade of gray-green that their mother used to call storm cloud. She looked up when Harland came in. He crossed the room and sat down in one of the small plastic chairs across from her, which put his knees somewhere near his chest and probably looked ridiculous, and he said, "Hi, Willa. My name is Harland. I was your dad's brother." "Well, Raymond was. I'm his brother, which means we're related in a roundabout way." She looked at him steadily. "Said nothing. I drove up from Toronto," he said. "It took about 2 hours. There was a bit of ice near Barrie." Still, nothing, but she was listening. He could tell she was listening. "I don't know what they've told you," he said. "About what's happening. About where you'll go. I wanted to come and meet you before any of that was decided, because it seemed like the right thing to do. To meet you first." A long silence. Then very quietly, "Are you going to take me somewhere?" "I don't know yet," Harland said, honestly. "I think we need to figure that out together." She looked back down at her piece of paper. On it, he could see now she had written a list, not words, numbers. A column of numbers, added and subtracted, like she'd been calculating something. He didn't ask what. He stayed 2 nights. He visited Paulette in the hospital, which was difficult in ways he hadn't anticipated. She was there but not there, her face slack on one side, her eyes tracking him with something that might have been recognition but might not have been. The nurses were kind and told him she was stable, that with time and therapy there might be some recovery, but that she would need long-term care either way. She would not be raising Willa. He slept in a motel near the waterfront and in the mornings walked along the cold lakeshore before the KAS office opened. He called his daughter Simone in the evenings and talked around what he was thinking without quite saying it, which she noticed immediately. "Dad," Simone said on the second night. "What's going on?" "There's a child," he said. "Raymond's, well, not exactly Raymond's, but connected to him. She's 11. Her mother is in the hospital. There's no one else." A long pause on the line. "And you're thinking—" "I don't know what I'm thinking," he said, which was true and not true simultaneously. "You have a 7-bedroom house, Dad. That's not a reason to." "I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it's a fact." He stayed up late that night reading about the process of becoming a foster carer. He was 61 years old. He had raised Simone mostly alone after his wife Lorraine died when Simone was 9. He knew something about grief in children, and something about quiet children, and something about what it meant when a person stopped asking questions about what would happen next, because the asking had started to feel too dangerous. On the 3rd morning, he went back to the KAS office and told Deborah Firth he wanted to apply for emergency temporary guardianship. Deborah looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Oakes," she said carefully, "that's a significant commitment. You understand this isn't." "I understand it's not permanent," he said. "I understand there's a process. I'm not asking for permanent. I'm asking for enough time. Enough time to see what she needs and whether I can provide it, and enough time so that she isn't placed with a stranger while her mother is still alive and the situation is still unresolved." Another measured pause. "We'll need to do a home assessment," she said, "and there are forms." "Tell me what forms," he said. Willa came to Rosedale on the last Thursday of November, carrying a backpack, a garbage bag of clothes, and a library book about migratory birds that was already 3 weeks overdue. She stood in the front hallway of Harland's house and looked at the ceiling, which was 14 feet high and had the original plasterwork from 1923, and said nothing. Harland had given her the bedroom at the back of the 2nd floor. Not the biggest bedroom, but the one with the window seat and the view of the garden and the old maple that he'd always thought was the best room in the house. Mira had put new sheets on the bed and left a lamp on and kept things otherwise spare, because Harland had asked her to keep it from feeling like a stage set. Willa sat on the window seat that first evening and watched the garden go dark. She ate the soup Mira made without comment. She said goodnight when prompted. She did not sleep. Harland could hear her through the wall, not crying, just moving. The small sounds of a person awake in a strange room, recalibrating. In the morning she came downstairs while he was making toast and stood in the kitchen doorway until he noticed her. "Do you want some?" he asked, lifting the bread. She nodded. They ate in a silence that was not quite uncomfortable. She had been enrolled by KAS in the local elementary school, a 15-minute walk. She went without complaint, came back without complaint, did her homework at the kitchen table with a mechanical pencil she pressed so hard. She tore through the page once and had to start over. She didn't ask for anything. She said please and thank you with an automaticity that suggested she'd been taught to deploy them as a kind of shield. Harland watched all of this and said nothing. Mostly, He asked questions she could answer with one word when he sensed she needed that. He asked questions she had to think about when he sensed she needed that instead. He made sure there was food and warmth and quiet and no sudden movements, and he did not ask her to be grateful. 2 weeks in, he found her crying in the upstairs hallway at 11 at night. She had her back against the wall and her knees pulled up, and she was crying in the way people cry when they've been holding it for a very long time. The kind of crying that sounds almost like it hurts, rough and ragged and unstoppable. He sat down on the floor next to her, not too close. He didn't say anything. He didn't tell her it would be okay. He didn't try to stop it. He just sat there on the floor of his hallway while she cried, and when it finally wound down and she was just sitting there shaking slightly, he said, "You can do that as many times as you need to." She looked at him sideways. Her face was a wreck. "My daughter used to do the same thing," he said. "After her mother died, right in that same spot actually. Different hallway. We lived in a different house then. But," he paused, "I used to sit on the floor and wait it out because there wasn't anything else to do." Willa wiped her face on her sleeve. "Did it get better?" she asked it. Her voice was rough. For her, he thought about it. Yes, slowly. It didn't get better all at once. It got better in pieces, and some pieces took longer than others. She was quiet. Then, "Is my mom going to die?" "I don't know," he said. "The doctors think she might be able to get some function back with time, but she'll need a lot of care. She won't be. She can't take care of you the same way she used to. Not anytime soon, maybe not ever." "I'm sorry, Willa." That's the honest answer. Willa nodded, like she'd already known and had just needed someone to say it to her directly. Christmas came. Harland asked Willa what she wanted, and she said she didn't know, and he could see that she genuinely didn't. Not because she was being polite, but because the habit of wanting things had been partly abandoned somewhere along the way children sometimes abandon it, when wanting things has too often led to disappointment. He didn't push. He got her the Migratory Birds book she'd had to return to the library overdue, and a pair of warm socks, and a good mechanical pencil with a lifetime guarantee, and on Christmas morning he watched her open them at the kitchen table while Simone, who had driven up from her apartment in the annex, pretended to be very interested in her coffee. Willa held the mechanical pencil for a long time. She didn't say anything, but something shifted in her face. Simone caught Harland's eye across the table and gave him a look he remembered from when she was small, the one that meant, "Okay, I see what's happening here." That was when the trouble began. It started small, and it started with a woman named Rosalind Draper. Rosalind was on the board of the Oakes Family Foundation, the charitable arm Harland had established a decade ago to fund housing initiatives across the GTA. She was accomplished, decisive, and had strong opinions about how philanthropic money should be deployed, which was why Harland valued her professionally. She was also a close personal friend, had been for years, and somewhere in the preceding spring she had become something more than that, though neither of them had quite named it, because naming things had always made Harland uncomfortable. Rosalind met Willa for the first time at a foundation dinner in January, when Harland had brought Willa along because there had been no other arrangement, and he wasn't comfortable leaving her alone in the house. Willa sat at the end of the table, eating carefully, speaking only when spoken to. She was very well behaved in the way children are when they are trying to be invisible. Rosalind was gracious and warm and asked Willa about school. In the car on the way home, Willa said, "She smells like your office." "She does sometimes come to the office," Harland said carefully. "She looked at me funny," Willa said. "What do you mean funny?" Willa thought about it. "Like I was something you'd found and weren't sure what to do with." Harland didn't answer that, because there wasn't a good answer, and he respected Willa enough not to offer a bad one. Rosalind called him the next morning. She was careful too, and that was how he knew something was coming. Rosalind was only careful when she'd been thinking something through and had decided it needed to be said. "Harland," she said, "I think you need to have a clear conversation with Cass about what the long-term plan is." "I know what the plan is," he said. "Do you? Because from the outside it looks like you've made a fairly significant emotional decision without fully thinking through." "She had no one," he said. "I understand that. But you're 61 years old, and she's 11. And the way you talk about her," Rosalind paused. "I'm not saying you've done anything wrong. I'm saying I'm not sure you understand what you've taken on." He kept his voice even. I appreciate your concern. Harland, I do. I'll think about what you've said. He didn't, particularly. He thought about other things instead. The concern, once voiced, did not go away. It just moved. Rosalind became quieter about it, which was somehow worse. When she came to the house for dinner, she watched Willa the way a person watches something they've decided is a problem they're waiting to be proven right about. She didn't do it, obviously. She was too careful for that. But Harland saw it, and he was quite sure Willa saw it too, because Willa noticed things. In February, Rosalind suggested, gently, that Willa might do better in a foster placement with more, she searched for the word, more appropriate resources, a family with children her own age. People who were trained for this, who understood the specific needs of children who had experienced trauma. She said all of this with genuine care in her voice, which was what made it hard to argue with, because it wasn't wrong, exactly. None of it was wrong. She's doing fine here, Harland said. She's doing fine, Rosalind agreed. But fine isn't. She doesn't want to move again, she told me. A pause. Did she? Or did you tell her that you didn't want her to move, and she heard what she was supposed to say? That landed. It landed because it was the kind of question that was genuinely possible. The kind of thing a person could get wrong, even with the best intentions, and Harland had been asking himself a version of it for weeks. He brought it to Willa directly. They were in the kitchen after school, Willa doing homework, Harland pretending to read the paper. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She looked up. "Do you want to stay here? You can be completely honest. I won't be hurt if," she said. "You don't have to say that." "I know," she said. "Yes," he looked at her. She held his gaze with those gray-green eyes. "Okay," he said. "All right." The thing that changed everything happened in March, on a Tuesday evening when Rosalind had come for dinner, and the three of them were sitting at the dining room table. Willa was quieter than usual. She'd had a difficult day at school, some trouble with a group of girls. Nothing catastrophic, but the kind of thing that sits on a child's shoulders. And she wasn't eating much. Rosalind noticed and said something offhand about whether Willa was feeling well, and Willa said she was fine, and Rosalind said, lightly, that children her age sometimes found it difficult to adjust to new environments. With that, it was nothing to be ashamed of. Children her age, with that particular careful distance, as though Willa were a case study rather than a person sitting 3 feet away. Willa set down her fork. She looked at Rosalind with an expression that Harland had not seen on her before, not angry exactly, but clear, completely clear. "I know you don't want me here," Willa said, not loudly, not rudely, just factually, the way she stated most things. The table went very still. Rosalind began to say something measured and considered, but Willa continued, in the same quiet voice, "I know you think he made a mistake, taking me in. I know you think it would be better if I went somewhere else." She paused. "Maybe you're right. I don't have any way to know if I'm good for him. I just know that this is the first place in a long time where I felt like I was allowed to take up space." Harland's chest did something complicated. Rosalind was very still. Willa picked up her fork again. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that at dinner." "No," Harland said. "You should have. You absolutely should have." He looked at Rosalind across the table. He was not angry with her. He understood her genuinely, and some part of him knew her concerns had not all been wrong. But he also understood, in that moment with a clarity that surprised him, what the right thing was. "I'm going to apply for permanent guardianship," he said. He hadn't known he was going to say it until he said it. "I should have said that to Cass months ago. I'm going to say it now." Willa looked up from her plate. "If that's okay with you," he said to her. She stared at him for a long moment. He watched her face do the thing it did when she was trying to be careful, trying not to want something too much in case it didn't happen. He watched her try to keep her expression neutral, and he watched her fail at it, and he was very glad she failed. "Yes," she said, "that's okay." Rosalind and Harland had a long and honest conversation a few days later, one that was difficult and necessary, and ended with a kind of respectful distance that he suspected was permanent. He did not enjoy it. He was not certain he had done the right thing in every way, but he was certain that he had done the right thing about Willa. The guardianship application took 4 months. There were home assessments, interviews, background checks, conversations with Willa's school, with her therapist. She had started seeing a therapist in February, a gentle woman named Dr. Chandra, who had an office downtown and a waiting room full of plants. Willa liked her and would not say why, which meant she liked her genuinely. The morning the final approval came through, Harlan told Willa over breakfast. He tried to say it plainly without making it too large, because large things sometimes frightened her. "It's official," he said. "Legally, I'm your guardian." Willa was eating cereal. She kept eating for a moment, looking at the table. Then she looked up. "What do I call you?" she said. He hadn't thought about that. He realized he had been thinking about so many things that he had not thought about that. "Whatever you want," he said. There's no rule. Whatever feels right." She thought about it. She had the pencil he'd given her at Christmas tucked behind her ear, which she did sometimes when she was working through a problem. "I'll figure it out," she said. "Take your time," he said. In September, the Oaks Family Foundation announced a new initiative, affordable housing units for Singsfull in Orillia and Barrie, developed in partnership with 2 community housing groups and the provincial government. It had been in planning for months. The announcement mentioned, in passing, that the initiative had been partly inspired by personal experience. Simone came up from the annex for the announcement dinner. She sat next to Willa and talked to her about architecture, which Willa had recently decided was interesting, and afterward, on the front steps of the Rosedale house, she told Harlan she thought he'd done something good. "I wasn't sure for a while," she said. "Neither was I," he admitted. "But you did it anyway," he said. "That was the whole thing, really. She just needed somewhere." Simone looked at him for a moment. "She calls you H," she said. "She does. Yes, that's kind of perfect." He thought about it. "It is a bit," he said. Through the front window, he could see Willa at the kitchen table with her overdue library book, a new one, about migratory birds again, a different volume, and the mechanical pencil and the small focused expression she wore when she was reading something that mattered to her. The maple in the back garden had turned, the way it did every autumn, from green to a particular shade of amber that was almost too much color for one tree. She had told him last week, quietly, while they were walking home from the library, that she liked how the same things happened every year. The leaves, the frost on the window glass, the way the light changed when the season turned. She said it like it was something she had only recently discovered, that the world repeated itself, that you could count on that the maple would turn amber every October whether anyone was there to see it or not. He had not been sure what to say to that. He had said, "Yes, it does that," and she had nodded, satisfied, and they had walked the rest of the way home in the good quiet that had, somewhere over the past year, become theirs.